Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CDCT live session. I'm Jason Rader. I'll be your host today. For today's topic, it is Prevent and Recover, Mitigating the Threat of Ransomware. And with me today, we have Chris Capusta, Principal Architect, and Michael Peralt, Senior Architect and Competency Lead for Security Tools, here with me at CDCT. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So, something about ransomware, right? What's the current state? I mean, it's funny how timely this particular session is, and no, we didn't plan it this way, but we got lucky. Seems like ransomware is everywhere today. Why don't we kind of get an update of the current state for folks who are not up to speed on this?
Ransomware bad. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere, and I think you mentioned timely. I think the stat I saw this morning was up to 1,500 businesses and even some countries were impacted just over the July 4th weekend here with a massive ransomware attack. And I think the stat I saw the other day is every 11 seconds in 2021 there's an organization impacted by ransomware. So I mean it's not slowing down by any means, and in fact, quite the opposite. So it's definitely a problem. It's definitely here to stay, and it's definitely getting worse.
Yeah, the stats I have are something around the neighborhood of 4,000 attacks a day.
Yikes.
4,000 successful attacks a day.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. And I think, when we think about ransomware, sometimes we kind of get pigeonholed into thinking about a specific, I think the last major one, over the holidays, the Christmas holidays, was kind of nation state focused. This one seems more like just crime organizations in general, or even to the point it seems kind of smash and grabby compared to the previous one that we were talking about. So it's almost like the point, this is just a method that criminals and nation states use. It's not even, it's hard to even get specific on this thing.
Well, everybody's using it right now. There's a number of crime organizations that are highly active in the ransomware space, and there's at least a number. I don't know what the number is, but there's at least some number of nation states that are piggybacking their activities on the back of that as an obfuscation method.
Yeah, and I mean, this one seemed the one that we're talking about over the 4th of July holiday seemed almost to me, as I looked at it and saw how they were working from a procedural basis, it looked kind of like a smash and grab. It was like it wasn't as sophisticated as some of the other stuff that we're looking for. And my first thought was maybe it's a diversion. I was looking for something else on the back end. But the sum total of it, until Jason's conspiracy theories come true here. But related to that, what do we do? I guess what's somebody to do? I guess one of the things that's this was related to kind of a supply chain-y kind of aspect. And that kind of hurts my feelings as a security professional when folks do a lot of things that security professionals are supposed to do. Organizations do those things and they still get kind of hit. So let's kind of break this down. What does a complete plan against, dealing with ransomware look like? Is there a tool that I can buy? Where's that ransomware tool?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no. So it's a layered approach. It's the same sort of approach you would take with any malware. This just happens to be the most prevalent at the moment, mainly because of the ability to if you're successful from an attacker point of view, the financial payoff is potentially significant. And anytime the juice is worth the squeeze, you're going to have more people doing it. So that's just the most or the simplest way today to make money in the malware business.
Yeah, and I think we've been so focused on keeping the bad actors out. We do endpoint security, we do email security, we train users not to click on malicious links and open malicious or unknown documents. What we need to also start focusing on, or increasing focus on, is the recovery aspects of it, as well as what is my storage environment doing to help me recover? What is my data protection doing to help me recover? How do I secure those environments? We're seeing more and more increasingly, those environments are starting to get some interest from the security teams, and in some instances even fall under the purview of the security teams going forward, because it's that last line of defense where if and sometimes it's not even a matter of if, it's a matter of when I'm infected, how can I recover, and how can I do it without paying that ransom? And that's where those environments start to become important in that holistic kind of ransomware response plan.
So assuming that folks have actually put some, I mean, nobody sat here and were super surprised by this stuff happening. People have typically put some storage solutions in place, some, solutions on the front end from a prevention perspective. What are some of the lessons that folks have learned, or what are some of the caveats that they've learned based on their strategies that they've had in the past?
Yeah, I think for some of it is what we're seeing now is the bad actors get in the environment and they actually sit there, in the non-smash and grab type scenarios, they sit there for 6 to 9 months and they learn and they figure out, where are the storage environments located? How can I compromise those? How can I compromise the backups and data protection? Because if they can compromise those areas, they can increase the chances that company or that country or individual will pay that ransom. So, I think we've learned that we need immutability in our environment. We need additional security in our environment. We've seen a lot of storage vendors implement things like immutable snapshots. Some go as far that you have to call support and get a 2-factor authentication code before they can even be deleted. So it's protecting not only from end user errors, but also bad actors and compromised systems as well. And we're seeing an increasing call in the data protection environments to put things on immutable storage, to air gap our backups and have a copy offsite that can't be compromised. So it's, some of it is lessons that we've kind of learned and followed over the past decade plus, and some of it is just bringing security to areas where in the past we may have neglected or just thought, hey, it's not a target for anything, I don't need security there.
And the flip side to that is, as we're learning more about the ransomware campaigns and how actors are actually getting into places, how they're leveraging these, there's a number of things that we're recommending or starting to look at as far as the overall security strategy on the front end of that as well. Better protection around email, and better intelligence and protection, or specifically around command and control. A lot of these things, Jason and I have joked about this in the past, but there's actually ransomware as a service where you can go and sign up just like AWS and get your own ransomware campaign. This being able to have enough threat intelligence within your environment and being able to act upon that to break those command and control chains so that the ransomware actors cannot go any further in the environment is a huge step in the right direction. We're starting to see people actively employ that. So that's another positive thing.
Yeah, and I think, we all have kind of heard the headlines. We've seen some stuff besides this most recent one, which kind of I alluded to as kind of smash and grab, but these other campaigns that Chris talked about that have 50 days, 60 days sitting watching. We've seen, like in some of the other events that have happened. I'm trying not to name anybody's names here, but where the payout's been like $5 or $10 million. They pay the ransom on these things. So spending 40 days learning somebody's environment to make sure that you've got them where you want them, to ensure that they pay. And even worse, some of these folks now, it's not just getting your data back so that your business is back. They're exfiltrating that data. And so they've got you 2 ways, right? They're like, okay. Because that was kind of the strategy that just a couple of months ago, people were like, we got good backups, rock and roll, we can just restore and we're back in business. But now they're like, yeah, they figured that out and they're exfiltrating this data to another location, proving that they've got it and saying, okay, well, we've analyzed it. We've seen this, and this, you'll have to do a disclosure. And that equals just a tragedy in a lot of organizations' environments, because all of the disclosure laws and those types of things that hit them, the myriad of them could take them down from a legal perspective. It gets crazy. So the risk is great.
And blocking those exfiltration channels is another methodology that we're seeing as part of the layered strategy.
Okay, so let's break it down. What do I have to do? I'm concerned about what's going on. We've got a security program in place. What are the things I need to check? What are the layers that we need to get to? Is it fair to say that if I'm talking about that immutable storage that Chris brought up, if I'm talking about that, that's kind of a last. I've really,
Yeah.
if I'm at the point of where I'm restoring from that immutable storage with that multi-factor access to get it, or that was to delete it, but you know what I'm saying. If I'm going all the way to that point to restore, that means there's a smoking crater somewhere that I'm restoring from, right? Which means there's been a loss of something, time, data, business reputation has happened. What are those things that keep me from having to get to that point?
That's the nuclear option. I prefer not to ever have to go down that path, but it's great to have, but let's avoid mutual assured destruction if possible. So to kind of stop that, there's really three areas that we kind of got to focus on. There's prevention of malware in the environment to the best of our extent of our abilities. There's the being able to detect actors who get into the environment and attempt to either run with their evil plan or try to exfiltrate stuff, etc. Being able to detect those and reduce the dwell time is hugely important. And the last thing is the business continuity side of things, where if we do have to use the nuclear option, where do we actually restore it to? Because if we have to use that option, we have to assume that everything in the current environment is compromised. So how do we get back up and running in a manner that avoids putting all of our good final last resort data back into a compromised environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the nuclear option. Although I'll say without naming names, in the famous energy hack on the East Coast that happened a few weeks ago, there's a situation where they ended up paying the ransom, and they found that the decryption software couldn't decrypt the data fast enough to get the systems back online. So it was a case of, we can't afford to be down longer. We have to go to the nuclear option. And what we're finding is, we've been conditioned to do things like DR tests and business continuity tests over time to make sure we can withstand natural disasters and things like that. It almost becomes a conversation of, we have to start doing restores and those types of scenario testing, because when we talk data protection, at least in the traditional sense, we talk about restoring files and folders and how quickly can I get someone an Excel spreadsheet back and maybe a system or two. In this case, we're talking, how long would it take to restore environments or even an entire business? And I don't think that's a conversation, as an industry, we've been having until very lately. And it's important not only to understand that, but to test it and be ready. So, nobody likes the nuclear option, but you got to be able to pull that trigger should the worst occur.
Yep,
completely agree. No, we definitely got to have it. I mean, that's why we have seed banks and all these other things. I mean, things you completely don't even think about. Like, like, there's a vault full of seeds so we can grow stuff again. Those things have to exist for that particular point. But I also think, as I'm talking to more people who are okay, if we do have to restore, to your point, how long is that going to take? And they're finding out that they have got great, programs to get all this stuff backed up and make sure that it can't be tampered with by bad guys. But when we're talking about, petabytes of information getting back, and the pipe that they've got to get it back over, like, well, it's going to take us 2 weeks, and that's unacceptable to some folks, right? 2 weeks is a long time. So I think that folks are kind of having to figure out and plan for those things, and you never get to that point unless you've actually gone through some type of testing or some type of environment. So I like the thing. I want to get to the nuclear option, but you talked about preventive and detective controls, Peralt. Tell me what we need to think about related to those things, and then we'll get to Chris on the corrective side. What we definitely need to look for on those.
Yeah, I was looking for a statistic here that I saw recently. It was actually fairly interesting. But almost 50% of ransomware attacks, when we actually trace those back, happen through brute forcing of RDP systems, which I thought was a little bit concerning, because not only are those basically on the internet, but B, we do not seem to have any good mechanism for being able to alert and shut people down when they sit there and try to brute force an exposed system like that. So the prevention side of things is pretty straightforward. It's basically limiting the vectors that the ransomware actor has to inject that into an environment. Those usually happen either through a phishing email of some sort, a drive-by web attack on an unpatched system, macros or code in an executable file that somebody gets, and stopping that stuff is a pretty, generally speaking, a pretty well thought out thing. Next generation XDR or endpoint detection and response systems have a lot of capabilities around that to prevent that type of stuff from executing, and being able to alert back to a central system that hey, this type of thing is happening. We need to look at this. On the email side of things, the sophistication of the email filters is getting a lot better. We have a lot of capabilities to do network sandboxing and being able to actually detonate payloads that are coming through, figure out if they are malicious or not, and being able to block those in line. That capability is gigantic. If we can stop those things, and if we can protect things like the RDP stuff that is hanging out there on the internet, we're going to start blocking right up front probably 90+% of the ransomware attacks or just malware attacks in general. There's once we get inside the network, there's another couple of preventative things that we need to take a look at. Things like one of the most common use cases that people have once they actually access the system is to elevate privileges. We have most everybody uses Active Directory, and people are using administrative accounts attackers are using administrative accounts to create new accounts, to stand up systems, etc. All of those privileged accesses should be logged, monitored. Like the second somebody logs in with a generic administrator account or an administrator account that is not part of a usual pattern, like every red light in the SOC should go off. Like, and somebody should be looking at that like right now, because those are huge indicators that something horribly wrong has gone on in the environment, and it needs to be corrected basically immediately. That's a huge. And what we're finding is there's a gap between the information that we can collect and how that's responded to, whether it be in an automated or manual fashion. There's a gap there that exists in a lot of organizations from a detection standpoint.
So let me ask this: it sounds like the things that you were talking about, like a pen test or something like that, would reveal that those things exist. Is that still fair to say? Are pen tests still valid for helping us out?
Oh. Pen tests and vulnerability assessments are definitely still valid as methodologies for being able to quantify the risks that exist in an environment. Absolutely.
Okay. On the corrective side, Chris, what kind of testing, other than kind of the standard restore process, are there attacks? I'm certain that there are attacks where they're coming in and trying to disable agents and those kinds of things on systems, or other things related to the corrective side?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hardening those environments to prevent any kind of that disruptive attack surface. Michael mentioned decreasing your attack vectors, and we're bringing that type of methodology into areas where maybe we haven't always considered it in the past. And when we look at what's needed from a modern system to survive these types of attacks, we've talked a little bit about immutability here. We need, I don't care if it's storage or data protection. We need a way to protect some of that data to make sure that it can't be deleted even by a bad actor with an admin account that's been compromised. It's got to be protected in a way where it can't be destroyed. And if snapshots today are your only form of backups, please call us. We can help get some additional protection in there. But, because we're finding, again, they're breaking into these environments, and that's the first thing they're deleting is all of those snapshots to prevent any kind of instant restores. And, on the data protection side, we're seeing a lot of traditional security measures be brought to that environment. Michael talked about the compromise of admin accounts, and we're seeing a lot of environments start to implement two-factor authentication. So even if that's account's compromised, there's a second piece of knowledge there that has to be known to get into those systems. And we're seeing the cloud has always been a great kind of long-term archive. We're starting to rethink, should it be my primary source for data protection or my primary landing zone for data protection? Because it's great to get it outside our four walls, but when it's time to restore, that time to re-ingest all that data is astronomical. And it's rethinking the way we store our data in multiple areas. We still need to follow the traditional 3-2-1 principles and have 3 copies on 2 different mediums, one of them offsite, arguably one of them air gapped even. But we start to take, as you mentioned, time to restore into those considerations. So if I do have to restore an entire environment, what does that look like? And we've always considered data protection environments to have the cheap and deep storage because it's archive, and I hope I never need it again. And we're starting to see flash be prevalent in those environments because that does increase or decrease our time to restore. Excuse me. But it's testing is important. Having those SLAs and understanding what happens when the worst occurs is obviously important in those environments.
We talk a lot about data center. Is there, from a workstation perspective, is there a good strategy related to this? I mean, is it really, are the workstations as much of a consideration in some of this stuff as they should be, maybe?
I think they should be, and you actually bring up a good point. It's not just workstations anymore. We're moving from data centers to centers of data, and with edge computing becoming more prevalent as things like AI and ML workloads start to become more prevalent at the edge. And I have data out there that needs to be protected in a traditional sense that we're used to in a data center. Those are all areas that I think we rush to get those technologies out there and kind of ignore some of the security principles and protection principles that need to go in place to prevent these types of attacks. So workstations, edge computing, remote locations, all of it has to fall under that kind of a security and protection umbrella that we're talking about today.
It definitely is a complex kind of world. I think about it from the business leader perspective a lot. And, this is crazy to these guys, right? Because usually the response, and I'm saying usually, maybe in the 90s when somebody said we had a problem, we would, hey, well, we got to buy a thing, to fix that thing. There's just no thing. I'd love for there to be a thing. There's just not a thing.
No, it's definitely not a product I go buy and I'm protected. And a lot of the marketing out there today is our product helps stop ransomware in its tracks. And that's very disingenuous because it may be a very important piece of that strategy and response plan that Michael went through earlier, but there is no point solution that covers it all. And I think even when we follow all of these, I think the stat I heard, alongside Michael's is the end users are still the weakest link in all of this. People will still click on links. People will still open malicious emails. There's phishing scams that people still fall for. And, you can harden everything in the world, but there's still that weak link in there that compromises security. And we got to be prepared for that.
But the Nigerian prince really wants to get me. He really does.
It's money in the bank. We've just got to get it out for him.
Yep.
I think, it gets frustrating at times because some of these, it's really the techniques that they're using are not brand new. It's just they've figured out a way to monetize it, which means you've got bigger and badder and scarier players involved in this because now we're talking billions of dollars potentially that have been paid out. And, that's always going to to Michael's earlier point, that's always going to make people more interested if they've got to put low effort and they can get a high rate of return. And based on, extradition and jurisdictional aspects, it's like game on, and it really gets super, super frustrating to us who are trying to conduct business, business owners who are trying to conduct business. And then all of these threats that exist. And, the other thing that I think is kind of unfair in in business is, you don't have a lot of people looking out for you except for you. You don't
Right.
have the cyber cops that are out there, or the cyber fire department that are going to put the nuclear fire out for you. It's really all on you. I mean, there's some agencies that exist, and those, they're great, but they're typically coming in after the fact to file a report. They're not typically on the front end of this helping you out. So I think, what I would say to folks out there right now, multi-factor access is a huge thing to fill the gap from those brute force attacks, those kinds of things. That's going to help you out a lot. Privileged identity management and managing those privileged accounts and service accounts inside, and having user and entity behavior analytics, if you can get that capability, is something that's huge. To Michael's earlier point, seeing what's going on inside the network and where this account's trying to do this, or trying to go delete file stores. That's, those are the kinds of things that you need. So that preventative stuff, we used to invest everything on that preventative aspect, but it's the detective stuff that's really going to save you these days, to be honest, because, the corrective aspect, that nuclear option, which has to exist. And by the way, with that most recent outbreak on July 4th, the people who had the quick and easy restores are the guys who won. Those guys are like, it was just a blip. I mean, most of the people that I heard and that we're dealing with are folks that were like, nope, we restored this server, we're back in business, everything's cool. Make sure we shut the clients down and clean the clients before we bring them back up, but otherwise everything's good. So that solution, I think this is really going to probably even better the case for those types of solutions, those corrective solutions, because it's not just, that's not interesting to me anymore. That's something that absolutely has to exist, and we have to know how to execute and prioritize and get those things back in business. And it's not just a product. Having the product and being able to execute the plan and program around the product are two completely different things.
Well, and a large part of that, as we mentioned, has to be end user training as well. I mean, I have one customer that makes it fun. They do escape rooms inside the building with a focus on cybersecurity, and it doesn't have to be web videos that someone clicks through and answers questions at the end. It can be entertaining, it can be engaging, and but it's very important to train end users that, hey, continually you can't click links. You got to look for external emails. You got to check domains when links come in. All of the easy stuff, so to speak, that bad actors use to try and get in and infiltrate a system.
I guess one of the good things about this is it's hit the headlines, right? I saw this on CNN 2 days in a row, right? So people know, and one of the good things about that user awareness aspect is it's helping them at their homes as well, because people are getting encrypted. So, making sure that users know that they've got skin in the game just by being a digital citizen, or whatever you would like to call that, that they're participating in this and they have just as much at risk. And basically at home, I don't think anybody's got good backups for the most part. So they're in big trouble if they've got data and pictures and stuff like that.
I do.
Yeah, I do. What am I saying? Right over here. But, in general, normal people
sure.
don't have it covered. Yeah. For the abnormal on the call here, we're special. Well, any closing words? I mean, what's the, obviously prevention is the best way to deal with this stuff. What are, for folks who've already got an investment, I guess that's the thing that kind of frustrates me the most. People who have an investment, what do they do? I think we talked a little bit about pen testing. You can find those things. What's some advice that you've got? We'll go with Peralt, and then we'll close with Chris.
So there's a lot of elements to the ransomware, to a ransomware prevention program. I think realistically, the best place to start is to figure out what the maturity level of each of those elements is. Really sit down, dig through that, figure out where we need to shore up the program, whether it be in prevention, detection, exfiltration prevention, or as Chris likes to say, the nuclear option on the data protection side. And really be realistic about what you can do in the environment at each one of those phases to create a balanced strategy for being able to prevent a catastrophic loss. And I think if companies are successful in doing that, they're going to be a lot, maybe not more protected, but definitely able to more effectively deal with the threat. Because as we've all been in this business a long time, these threats evolve, And if we're not continuously maturing our programs in all of these areas to align with that, we're going to get left behind. And that's, as soon as we get left behind from a security perspective, that's when bad things happen. So I think awareness of the overall program and an awareness that it's not there is no start or stop. It's an area of continuous improvement, I think is the most effective strategy long term to being able to deal with these types of threats.
Well, luckily, Peralt and I were right on the same wavelength there, because I had a similar closing comment. I mean, it's you have to treat it as an internal product. There is no endpoint where you say, "Hey, I'm completely protected from ransomware. This is good to go. Just move on to something else." It's re-examining it. It's red teaming it to make sure that we've found all the holes, and then once we've accounted for everything that's out there today, we've got to go back and get ready for everything that's coming tomorrow. So, I mean, I think the best piece of advice I can give is test and test often. You know, treat it like DR, treat it like business continuity, make it part of your annual, biannual, however often you feel the business needs to do it. But test your methodology, because every 11 seconds in 2021, it's only a matter of time before it finds its way into an organization. So, the better prepared you can be, the better you'll be in response.
No, I love that. And I think, from testing the overall incident response program in general is something that organizations are paying a lot more attention to today, because this is a component of overall, and being caught, wrong-footed in a situation like this can really make the difference between feast or famine for your business for the next, certain amount of time. And I think the other frustrating thing about this is there's no easy button, right? There's literally I always say there's no macaroni and cheese recipe for this. So, I mean, I think if folks are like listening, saying, well, just tell me the 3 things that I've got to buy, it's just not going to happen. I mean, it depends on how you work. It depends on where you work. It depends on, so many things, where your data is and geography and all kinds of things associated with that it really is a comprehensive program. The beautiful thing about it is there's help, right? There's folks who can put all of this stuff together and tell you all of the things you need to check and put together a full program. But it's not something that even, love the vendors that are out there, but going to a single vendor site to try to get this thing solved isn't going to help you either. It's multiple aspects and multiple tiers. But good to know that you guys are on it and evangelizing it across the board. And we appreciate you guys being here today.
No, thank you. Happy to help.
Travis.
Well, if you'd like to know more about what we do here at Insight CDCT, please visit us at insightcdct.com. And thanks for joining us today. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.